Hello everyone and welcome to another Endgame episode with Coach B and MasterYourChess.com. In this video we're going to take a look at the positions that involve a rook and pawn versus rook, where the defending king is cut along a rank. And before I go over the theory, I want to go over some important key terms. We will refer to a perfect cut along a rank if the defending king stands on the same rank as the pawn or behind. An imperfect cut along a rank is if the defending king is cut one rank ahead of the pawn. And here's the theory. If the defending king is cut along a rank on the short side of the board, this is a draw due to the long distance checks defense. With the king on the long side of the board and a perfect cut where the defending king is on the same rank as the pawn, the game is always a win with the knight pawn or a bishop pawn, even if the pawn is on the second rank. To win with the central pawn, the pawn must be at least on the fourth rank. With the rook pawn and the defending king cut along a rank, these positions are easily drawn, except in the cases where the stronger side's king is able to chase away the defending rook, and then white has chances of winning. Black's only hope in those scenarios is a successful Vancouver defense, which will not be covered in this video. However, I will put a link of that defense in the description so you can look into it if you're not familiar with it. In the imperfect cut scenario, the ending is drawn if the defending rook occupies the file adjacent to the pawn. So let's get started and see why. With the perfect cut along a rank, Black is able to draw if his king is cut off on the short side of the board. After rook to a8, Black has the long distance checks defense set up and he's able to draw, no matter what white does here. After king to d4, Black is going to start a series of checks and white will not be able to escape those checks. If he moves the king far away from the pawn, after rook to a4, Black will be able to capture it. Coming back after rook to a8, the only other try that white has is moving the rook to c5 to try to use the rook to shelter from the checks, but here Black can move the rook to d8, blocking the king from moving forward. The pawn cannot move forward to e5 as Black will move the king to f5 and then he's going to be able to reach in front of the pawn, reaching the Philidor defense. And if the rook moves to d5, then rook to a8. After king to d4, king to f4. Rook to f5 check, king to g4, and again Black will draw here, starting a series of checks from the side with the rook. Next, we have a knight pawn and a perfect cut along the rank where the defending king is on the same rank as the pawn. Here, even if Black has the move, white is totally winning. After something like rook to a8, preventing the white king to move forward, the easiest way to win here is rook to h5. After this, Black doesn't have many options. His king is stuck, he cannot move forward, so the only thing he's got is maybe moving the rook back to b8. And now white will move the pawn to b5. Black cannot capture the pawn as white's rook defends it, and also the black king is stuck. The white king on b3 covers the square c4, and the rook covers the square c5 and all the squares along the rank. So Black's king cannot make any progress. After this, all Black's got is maybe rook to b7, and then white will move the king to b4. After rook to b8, rook to h6, and this pattern repeats again. King to d5, pawn to b6, rook to b7, king to b5, rook to b8, and now white can already go ahead and chase the black rook away with the winning game. After king to a6, king to c5, king to a7, Black is totally lost. And I'm just going to fast forward through the moves. And now white wins the game. Coming back, after rook to b8, I do want to mention that if white wants to repeat this pattern one more time, he can do so. That is winning as well. So after rook to h7, king to d6, pawn to b7, now Black is totally lost. He cannot make any progress with his king. All he's got is maybe king to e6. But after king to b6, white will chase the rook away and promote winning the game. We're coming back after b7. No better is moving the rook to g8, because white will still make progress and then promote the pawn with the winning game. With the bishop pawn and a perfect cut along the rank, again white is totally winning with the same pattern. After rook to b8, rook to h5, white will continue with the same pattern and then win the game in the same manner. After the white king attacks the rook, Black cannot capture the pawn here, as white will simply capture back with the winning game. And after something like rook to g8, the pawn will simply march forward, promoting winning the game. Coming back from the very beginning, maybe you've asked yourself, what if black is going to try to defend differently, giving a series of checks from behind? Well, let's take a look at that position as well. So after rook to b8, rook to h5, king to f4, pawn to c5, what if black now moves the rook to b1? Well, here white is still winning. After king to c4, rook to c1, king to b5, rook to b1 check, king to c6, black will not be able to prevent white from reaching the Lucena position. Now I'm just going to fast forward through the moves. And here, white reached the well-known Lucena position with the winning endgame. If you're not familiar with this position, I will put a link in the description with the link on the Lucena position so you can see how white will win the game from here. With the central pawn and a perfect cut along the rank, white is only able to win if the pawn has reached the 4th rank or above. With the pawn on the 2nd or 3rd rank, black is able to draw with correct play. After rook to h4, black is able to draw, moving the rook to a8. And now there's only two possibilities that white has. If he moves the king to c3, black is going to check him on a3. And now white needs to retreat. He cannot move the king to c4 as he's going to be skewered by the black rook. And after king to c2, black will simply move the rook back to a8, repeating the position. So coming back after rook to a8, the only other try that white has is moving the pawn to d4, from which black will move the king to g3, attacking white's rook. The rook will retreat, let's say rook to h5, and now king to g4, attacking the rook once more. Rook to e5, and here an excellent move that will draw the game, rook to a3, cutting off the white king from defending his pawn. After pawn to d5, king to f4. And now the rook needs to retreat. If the rook moves to h5, king to e4, attacking the pawn, and there's nothing that white can do from preventing black taking that pawn. After pawn to d6, rook to d3 check, picks up the pawn, and black will draw the game. Coming back, I do want to mention that here, white cannot check the black king as the black king will simply pick up the pawn. So he is forced to move it to d6 where black will be able to pick it up. And coming back, after king to f4 attacking the rook, we looked at rook to h5. If white retreats the rook to e8, here, after rook to a5 attacking the pawn, again, black will be able to pick up the pawn. That pawn will have to march forward, and then black will come behind it with the check, picking it up. No better is defending the pawn with rook to d8, because after king to e5, pawn to d6, and rook to d5, that pawn again is lost. With the central pawn on the 4th rank or above, the same defense does not work anymore. After rook to a8 and pawn to d5, king to g4, rook to h6, king to g5, rook to e6, and now rook to a4, try to separate the white king from reaching the pawn will move to d6, and after king to f5, here white can simply push the pawn to d7. If the black king takes the white rook, the pawn will simply promote, and now white is winning the game with the queen versus rook. Though it's not an easy endgame, white still has the advantage. Coming back after pawn to d7, a lot worse is trying to attack the king with the rook. For example, after rook to a3, the king will march to c4, eventually stopping those checks, and now black will have to prevent the promotion square, from which white will move the rook to e8, and now black will have to sacrifice the rook as the pawn will promote, and white will be up a queen with a lot easier game to win. With the rook pawn, this game is easily drawn as long as black does not allow the white king to go ahead and chase the black rook away. If he plays passive, he can lose this game. And I'm just going to fast forward to a possible way how white will be able to win this game. And now black allowed white to go ahead and chase away the black rook, and he's going to be able to win this game. But coming back even to this position, what black needs to do is move the rook to e7. After king to a5, black will move the rook to e1, starting a series of checks from behind. We know that black can draw if he is able to get in front of the pawn, so he's going to try to keep the opposition, not letting the white king go in front of the pawn. So after something like rook to g5, the black king will go to c6. After rook to g6, black will move the king to c7, trying to reach in front of the pawn. Rook to g7, and now black goes to b8, where he's going to be able to go in front of the pawn with an easy draw. Coming back, I do want to mention that no better is rook to g4 trying to shelter from the side checks, because after rook to a1 and rook to a4, black can simply capture the rook, and after white captures back, after king to b6, black is able to capture the pawn, drawing the game. Next, we're going to take a look at the positions where white has an imperfect cut. Again, an imperfect cut is where the defending king is cut one rank ahead of the pawn. In these type of games, we said that this game is drawn if the defending rook occupies the file adjacent to the pawn. So in this position, if it's black to move, this game is drawn. All that black has to do is move the rook to a8 to the file adjacent to the pawn. And now white doesn't have many options. The white king cannot make any progress as he is cut along the a file. Also, he is cut on the right side by the black king. If he simply waits with the rook, let's say rook to g6, black will simply wait on the a file with rook to a7. So white has only two options here. As the white king cannot do anything, if white attacks the black king with rook to g5 check, the black king will simply march to c6 and then go in front of the pawn, reaching the Philidor defense. If white marches the pawn to b5, then after king to c5, there's nothing that white can do to prevent black from reaching a draw. After something like rook to g5, again the king will march to b6, king to b4, rook to a1, and black has reached the Philidor defense. Rook to g6, the king will march to b7, rook to g7, king to b6. Rook to g6, king to b7. Checks from the rooks don't make any progress, and if white tries king to c5, black will start a series of checks with rook to c1, and white cannot make any progress. Next, we have a pawn on the bishop's file, and with black to move, after rook to b8, this game is drawn again. The same drawing technique applies. After something like rook to g6, doesn't make any progress, black just needs to wait as well, keeping the b file locked. And after c5, king to d5 draws the game. In the previous position, we played rook to g5 check, where black just moved in front of the pawn, reaching the Philidor defense. Here we're going to take a look at a different way white can play, moving the pawn to c6. But even after this, black will draw the game with rook to c7. And there's nothing that white can do. White cannot check the king, as the king will simply take the pawn with the king. And after king to b4, black will still capture the pawn, reaching a draw. Coming back from the beginning, with white to play in this case, white is able to win this game. And there's two ways that white can play. One way is moving the rook to b6, taking control of the file adjacent to the pawn right away. After this, white is totally winning. After something like rook to c7, white will march the king to b4, rook to c8, pawn to c5. And now, as the pawn reached the 5th rank, the frontal checks defense doesn't hold anymore, and white will be able to reach the Lucena position. After something like king to d5, rook to d6 will chase away the black king, so king to e5. After rook to d1, the black king is cut away, and white is able to go and chase the black rook. After rook to b8 check, king to a5, rook to a8 check, king to b6, rook to b8, and now king to c7, and the checks have stopped. Black needs to retreat the rook, rook to b2, pawn to c6, and now there's nothing that black can do to prevent white from reaching the Lucena position. So I'm just going to fast forward through the moves. And here white reached the well-known Lucena position. Coming back from the beginning, after rook to b6, rook to c7, and king to b4, we looked at rook to c8. I do want to mention that attacking the pawn right away with king to d4 does not help, as rook to d6 will again separate the black king, and after king to e5 and pawn to c5, white defends the rook and reaches the 5th rank, from which the white king is able to chase away the black rook, reaching the Lucena position, as we've just seen in the previous variation. Coming back from the very beginning, I mentioned that there's two ways that white can play. I do want to mention that moving the king to b4 right away also wins here. After rook to b8, king to c5, rook to c8, and king to b5, rook to b8 check, now white can block the checks with rook to b6. If black takes the rook on b6 and the white king captures back, there's nothing that black can do to prevent white from promoting the pawn. And I'm just going to fast forward through the moves. And white promotes the pawn with the winning game. Coming back, not taking the rook doesn't help either. After rook to h8, pawn to c5, king to d5, rook to d6 check. The king is chased away, and after rook to d2 retreating the rook, white will again reach the Lucena position. And we've seen that checks from the front will be stopped by the white king simply marching towards the rook, so let's take a look at checks coming from behind. After rook to h1, the pawn will march to c6, rook to b1 check, king to c5, and I'm just going to fast forward to the moves to see how black will not be able to stop white from reaching the Lucena position. And here, again, white reached the well-known Lucena position with the winning game. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video, and I encourage you to visit my website, masterychess.com, where you will be able to practice these positions against the computer. All you need to do is go to masterychess.com, click on Endgame versus Computer, Rook Endgames, Rook and Pawn versus Rook, and then cutting off the king, where if you scroll down, you will be able to see cutting off the king along a rank and practice these positions against the computer.